Hey, what's up? What's up, everyone? Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. What's happening, people? Um, I was gonna make a video on this topic, and I was gonna make a video on a few topics, but I decided to go on live instead, just to chop it up with you guys. Plus, I wanted to hear your opinions directly. I wanted to just I'll probably open up the panel later just in case any of you guys want to join the live and give me some of your opinions on how this fight is going to go. You know how we normally do when it's like a super fight, being that this is the biggest fight in boxing right now. Not sure if it's going to end up being one of the best fights of the year, but I mean, as far as the matchup and as far as the hype and everything, this is the biggest fight. I believe it to be the biggest fight in boxing right now. You know, uh, but we'll see how the fight is going to go. I mean, me personally, I think that the fight is going to be fine. I don't think it's going to be an amazing fight, um, but I do think that it's going to be a decent fight. I don't think it's just going to stink like some other super fights we had in the past. Um, I think there's a lot of fights that ended up just being boring or they end up just being too one-sided in order to be a good fight. But I think this fight is going to be a decent fight at the end of it all. I think it will be good. I don't think Crawford is going to run. And I think Canelo is going to take this fight more seriously than he has in his more recent fights. I think a lot of the opinions of people is based on emotion, fandom, biases. You know what I mean? I think, you know, a lot of people are also basing their views on this fight off the last two fights that they had, off the last fight each one of them had. You know what I mean? And you got to understand that the styles are totally different from those two opponents that each one of them had. Crawford for Majimov was, you know, it was just Madrimov was, I mean, he basically was the same type of dude in the Virgil Ortiz fight too. I mean, he was just really irky jerky, tricky. You know what I mean? Not really just being overly cautious, overly technical, not running, but like kind of like playing it too smart. And I think Crawford, you know what? I might as well get into it. I might as well talk about all of that. I want to start out with that. Give me 1 second. Let me just get some water. Let me get some water here because I know I'm going to be talking for a while. Some water. So let's get right into it. Let's start out with talking about the previous opponents. You guys hear me clear? Let me know if you guys hear me clear. Um, the two previous opponents, Madrimov and Skull. All right, Madrimov, very arky jerky, feinting ridiculous amount of feints in that fight. He did what Crawford did to some of his other opponents. You know what I mean? Like Crawford showed too much respect. So when in comparing the Virgil Ortiz fight to Madrimov and the Crawford fight, Crawford was slowly outpointing him, and he gave Madrimov too much respect. Whereas Madrimov was giving Ortiz issues, and he was kind of winning or doing well against Ortiz, but Ortiz started to be the aggressor. Whereas in the Crawford fight, Crawford kind of just let it ride out and kept it at the same pace it was going. Like he was winning, but it wasn't like spectacular fashion. It was safe. Whereas Ortiz decided to push forward because in that slow paced kind of fight, it wasn't really working in his favor. So he started to be aggressive, and it made it a better. People looked at it like a better performance because Ortiz decided to push the pace more. I scored both fights the same. I think I gave Ortiz. I think both of them I scored like 8-4. I thought Ortiz won 8-4, maybe 7-5, and I think Crawford won the same. You know, that's the way I saw both fights. But the Ortiz fight was more entertaining because Ortiz pushed the pace a little bit more. It caused them to get hit more, but it made for better action. Right now, Crawford don't normally shows that amount of respect, but it was definitely his first fight at 154, right? And at this time, a lot of people thought that Madrimov was going to win. A lot of people were calling Madrimov to win. You know, I remember doing a breakdown for the fight, and to be honest, I was a lot more concerned about how Crawford would look in that fight, much more than I was against Spence. You know, I mean, looking at some of the breakdowns that I did at this time, I always picked Crawford by KO from the very beginning. Like, it was no part of me that thought Spence was going to win, and that even though Spence has never been knocked down or he never been knocked out, I knew he was going to get knocked out that day. Whereas the Madrimov fight was like, I really don't know how this is going to go. You know what I mean? But Madrimov is completely different from Canelo. Canelo is going to take way more risk. Okay, whether Canelo is fighting bigger opponents or guys his size or smaller, Canelo takes risks. He's going to step in. He's a power puncher. You know what I mean? He's a boxer puncher, but he's going to want to mix it up. He has a phenomenal chin. He has one of the best chins in all of boxing. He has been fighting guys that's bigger than him for some time. So I'm expecting Crawford to take the Victor Postal approach, where he's going to move, but he's going to throw punches while he moves. He's not going to be running. He's going to be throwing with punches and looking to counter whenever the opportunities are there, which is much different from William Skull. Right? I'm not going to go back and watch that fight. I'm just not. You know, I don't need to study anything from it because it was a terrible fight. Because Skull, unlike Lara, unlike some of the other movers that Canelo had faced, like Saunders, you know, Plant, these guys still let their hands go. Skull did not let his hands go. All right. He touched them every now and then, but most of it was just all about making Canelo miss and not really making him pay. All right, so I don't think that Crawford. I think the only other fighter that moved a lot without throwing punches was Jamel Charlo. You know, Jamel made it clear he felt Canelo's power early on in the rounds, and he said, "I'm not going to get knocked out." And he made a decision to run the remainder of the fight. And even in that fight, as bad as that fight was, I think the William Skull fight was even worse than that. I think that that fight was the absolute worst of all fights with Canelo against guys that moved a lot. So what we saw in Skull and what we saw in Madrimov, we're not going to get here. Now, normally in these big fights, I do multiple breakdowns. This will be my first. All right, and I decided to do it live. And I'm going to let some of you guys join up a little later in the video. At some point, I'm going to start doing some real hard film study because I'm going to, I want to do a really good breakdown. I want to make sure I stand on where I'm going to go. Before the last two fights that they had, or the last fights that they each had, I was always leaning towards Canelo to win a decision. Okay. And part of that reason was because even if I'm not expecting a knockout, by the way, from either fighter. All right, I'm not. I never was expecting a knockout for you. I think at bare minimum, Crawford will take risks, but I don't think he'll be reckless. So there's what I'm expecting from Crawford is to fight smart like he did Postal. I'm gonna keep bringing up that fight because he moved, but he let his hands go. Um, I think he's gonna have respect for Canelo. He had respect for Postal. He had respect for Madrimov. Um, he probably had some respect for maybe one or two other fighters, Sean Porter. I don't know if that was because of their personal relationship or not. But up until the knockout round, he had a lot of respect for Sean Porter. I don't think he was looking to stop Sean Porter until his corner let him know that he was down. Okay, I don't think he had any intentions of really stopping Sean. I think he just wanted to win on points, but he decided to go all out at that round where they told him he was down on points. Well, shout out to everyone that's chatting in the chat. I see you guys. Real quick shout out to Strong Blaze, Hunter Gray, Geo, the Alpha Wolf, Drunk Irishman. All right. What's up? TAO, what's up? J-Min, Kamik Ozzy, Pepino, what's up? So shout out to everyone that's in the chat. So I think the Victor Postal approach is what we need from Crawford. And in that approach, I don't think that's the approach you get knocked out. I know Canelo is going to be coming in. He's going to be looking. He likes to double up that jab and then throw the right hand to the body behind it, or that backhand hook thing that he does, that looping right hand behind the jab, or he'll throw the uppercut through the guards, because I'm expecting Terence Crawford to keep his hands up high. So Canelo is definitely going to be throwing bombs. Even throwing a lead left hook, to the body or up to his head. He's going to be doing all of that. As long as Crawford doesn't keep himself at the ropes for too long, as good as he is defensively, I don't think he's like a Floyd, okay, defensively. And I don't even think he's like, I would even edge Caleb Plant a little bit more over Crawford, especially in the earlier rounds defensively. I think guys like Floyd was just like, I can be right in your face and you can't hit me. Whereas Crawford is good defensively, but I wouldn't take that many risks sitting in a pocket with Canelo like that. Or not just in the pocket, but I wouldn't rely solely on reflexes to get out of the way when it comes to Crawford. You know what I mean? I think a lot of his defense definitely is going to have to deal with his movement. You know what I mean? And his hands being up. Got to be careful with the parrying, because we know that Canelo. I was watching some of the because one of you guys left a comment and you guys thought I was a little bit too generous towards Berlanga in the fight with Canelo. And so I was rewatching some of it, and I was looking at the knockdown that was in the third round, I believe, where Canelo dropped him. And I've seen a lot of fighters. We see fighters do this all the time. Guys that like to keep their hands up and they like to parry, they keep that right hand up, that phone up, and they like to parry down. That would be a tragic mistake against Canelo, who is a big left hooker. You know what I mean? Especially with that lead left hook. He's really tricky. Jab, jab, jab. And then out of nowhere, that jab turns into a hook. And now your ass is on the ground. You got to be very careful with him. So I think a lot of Bud's defense is going to rely on his hands being up, his movement. You know what I mean? Circling away from certain punches, stuff like that. So I'm gonna go with the Victor Postal approach from Crawford. Attack, but look for good opportunities to attack, counter. Borrow some of the few things that we saw in the Bivol fight, which is going to be one of his greatest strengths, his jab. His jab is going to be a problem for Canelo. And I'm talking about southpaw Bud, because we know when Bud is really being serious in a fight, he's a southpaw. You know, all that switching stuff has not really been a factor, you know, when Bud has been taking the opponent seriously. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, no matter what he says, he is a southpaw. You know, I think the right hand thing was fun. It was good when he was fighting guys that really wasn't at his level. You know what I mean, or close to it. But it's pretty clear that he's the southpaw, and he's going to probably come out as a southpaw. I don't think he's going to be switching. I think when we do see him switch, it might be just temporarily, just to create angles, you know, especially if they are going through some exchanges and stuff. But I don't see Bud fighting as a righty at all. You know what I mean? Shout out to Young Hollywood. What's up, Michael Tony? What's up, Thomas? What's good with you? Uncle Jack, what's up, man? E class, all strong, all around strong. What's up? What's up, everyone in the chat? All right. So with Bud, I think that's going to be his approach. I know people are going to get into the resume. You know, I know when I read the comments later, Bud is not having for anyone but Spence, and Spence is not on a level. And Canelo, they're just going to say, like, oh, you know, he got hurt by Gamboa. These are the comments that I read in every single video I do about Crawford. You know, they bring up Gamboa hurting him years ago. They bring up Spence being his only good opponent. You know, they bring up how he looked at 154 against Madrimov. They're gonna bring up some of those things, and that's fine. There's not going to be anybody there on Crawford's resume that I could compare to Canelo. I said this years ago myself. I said this when he fought and before he fought Spence. I know Spence was the guy at the time, but Spence clearly wasn't the most dangerous opponent. There's a few other guys that was a lot more dangerous stylistically for Bud. You know, they might not have the name and the resume as Spence did at the time. But guys like Kavalaskis, Madrimov, and some of the other opponents that Crawford had faced were just a little bit more difficult than Spence. All right, but Canelo, there is no one there. All right, there is no one there to compare to than Canelo. I mean, it is what it is. There's no way to argue it. That's one advantage. That's going to be a clear Canelo advantage because Canelo, on a professional level, has more experience than Crawford. He's been in there with a ton of southpaws that were really good champions and stuff like that. It's just Crawford's been doing it. I mean, Crawford's been doing it for a long time, but Canelo's been doing it at a higher level for a long time. All right, but it's not always about that, you know, because Canelo had a better resume than every fighter that he fought when he fought them, outside of Floyd Mayweather, pretty much. And some of the other guys, like superstars he had fought in the earlier years, like Cotto and stuff like that. But it's been some time now, probably since Cotto, where every fighter he's fought, he always had the resume going into the fight. But it's not all about the resume. It's about the styles. And Crawford, stylistically, is a problem for Canelo. He is a southpaw. He moves well. He has good power. You know, he has fast hands. You know, he has good defense, good counterpuncher. I mean, he's the full package. He's durable. He is physically strong, which is another thing that people don't bring up enough. I know a lot of people didn't bring it up going into the Spence fight. Everybody kept talking size this, size that. And I said, no, Crawford's physically stronger than Spence. And he knows how to tie it really well. You know, he has that wrestling background. All of these things are brought up. And we saw it in the fight when he started pushing off the bigger Spence like he was nothing. He just pushed him away whenever he was crowded by Spence. So you got to remember those things. Now, I know Canelo's much bigger. Much stockier. Crawford's taller, slightly taller, a little bit more of a reach advantage, you know, but he is physically strong. But Canelo, going to Canelo a little bit, I always say this to you guys, and if you guys been here long enough, you guys know my opinion on Canelo. My favorite version of Canelo in his whole career is at 160. I mean, towards the end of 160. Before he went up to fight, I mean, Triple G rematch, whether you think he won that fight or not, you know, if you think that Triple G should have won or you thought it should have been a draw, It was a very close fight. That version of Canelo is the best version of Canelo I've ever seen to this day. To this day. The amount of jabs, his speed, his volume, he was just going to punch for punch. He matched Triple G. You know how he burned out in the first fight where he was like, he was definitely winning the earlier round, right? He was definitely a better boxer. He was hooking to the body, like he was doing everything right, but he burned out quick after like 3 rounds or so, right? Canelo in the Triple G rematch is the perfect version of Canelo, in my opinion. I know he became undisputed at 168, but I think in those years, when I watched those fights, when I rewatched the Saunders fight or the Calvin Smith fight, or I rewatch, Plant, like, I like to go to the Plant fight a lot. I really like that fight. I like the Plant. The Plant fight was my favorite fight at 168. That was my favorite fight. But even in that point, Canelo relied too much on the big punches, the power punches, where the Triple G rematch just jab, 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 jab. You know what I mean? Jab. Like Triple G, we know he's a crazy jabber, but Canelo's stamina in that fight was crazy. Like, I don't know what the punch stats were, but I know, like, when I watched that fight, there's no comparison of any other Canelo performance to me. And that's just me. That's just my opinion. If that version of Canelo were to show up for this fight, which I think is too late because that's some years ago now, and Canelo, even though he's not older than Crawford, like he's older in boxing years, like he's coming up on 20 years as a pro. We'll never see that version again. But I think that would be the version, that jab. He didn't throw any jabs against Bivol. He barely reached, from what I remember, I think he barely threw over 10 jabs or something in the Bivol fight. You know what I mean? If Canelo, I think the primary thing that Canelo needs in this fight is to bring that jab back, right? He needs that jab. He needs to set up the power shots with behind his jab. He needs to be that. He needs to work on his stamina. His conditioning gotta be, you know what I mean? Like, we already know what you could do at 168, 175. We already know. Just being a bigger guy is not going to be what wins the fight here. Because sometimes being a small, I mean, we've seen Usyk, what Usyk has shown us continuously, that size is just not the only factor. It can be very important in certain fights. But when we're talking about the super elite, we're talking about the top 5, top 7 pound for pound, right? Wherever you want, whatever order you want to put them. We know who those guys are. Excuse me. We know Crawford's in there. We know Inouye's in there. We know Usyk is in there. We know Canelo's in there. Bivol, Better BF. Those are the super elite, right? Everything else after that is, to me, I think you can base it whatever order. But I think those guys are clearly the super elite. Do me a favor, guys. You might not have to because you already know where I'm going with this, but watch Bivol versus Canelo. Then go right after that, watch Bivol versus Better BF. Like back to back. Not even a full fight. Give you 3-4 rounds. There's a major difference. And the difference is one has the engine to keep going against Bivol and the other one doesn't. They're both throwing power shots, but one has that engine to just keep pressing towards Bivol. So even though Bivol is outboxing him, Bivol's going to slow down. He's going to get overwhelmed at some point. That never came with Canelo because he just doesn't have the cardio to keep it up that pace. The only time I ever seen him have that amount of cardio to keep going at the The high volume puncher was a Triple G rematch down at 160. I have not seen that since then. And he hasn't really needed it. He needed it against Bivol, but I just felt like Canelo's gotten a little lazy. I do believe, though, and I really believe this. We'll see on fight night, but I believe that Canelo is going to take, I don't think as much money as he's getting paid. I don't think he wants to lose any fight, but I think this is the fight that's going to make him want to prepare at the highest level for this fight. I think all the other fights, we already knew where it was going. He could do what he wants. He can hold up Munguia in the fight if he wants to. He could toy around with Berlanga, or he could decide not to chase Skull around and know that he's still getting a decision. I'm not talking about any of those fights. I'm talking about a fight where, like, if I'm not on my A game, I might mess around and lose this. I have to be prepared for every outcome. We believe we know what approach Bud is going to take, but we don't really know, because Bud is very, very unorthodox. So I don't know what approach Bud is going to take. But I do believe that he can take a page out of Bivol's book and do a little bit of what we saw in that fight. And that's mainly with the lead hand. Because we've seen that from Bud before. We've seen him take that approach. Just keep working that lead hand. Was it Diaz, Felix Diaz was the Dominican fighter he fought. That was the first time I seen Bud just like work his magic with that lead hand. What's his name? Let me look it up. Felix Diaz, yeah, the Dominican fighter. I remember that fight. He might take that approach and while moving. Bivol, on the other hand, he relied on his high guard all of the time. So even though Canelo was able to sneak some uppercuts in there at times, some big uppercuts, that was it. Everything else was getting blocked. The overhands, the hooks, everything else was getting blocked. And there was no jabs. Jamin says Bud is not a high volume puncher either, which suits Canelo's favor. Yeah, he's not high volume, but yeah, you're right. He's not high volume, and I don't think he needs to be high volume to win. I mean, Triple G was high volume, and it wasn't enough for him to get either decision, even though I think he clearly won the first fight. And I thought the second fight could have gone either way. I actually think that Triple G edged the second fight, but I didn't think it was a robbery. I thought the draw would have been cool. I mean, I wasn't even mad that they gave it to Canelo. I don't think Bud is high volume, but he's definitely can fight at a high rate for all 12 rounds. He could fight at a higher rate for all 12 rounds. Yeah, I seen, this is the second comment that I've seen about Danny Jacobs. So that was one of Canelo's best looking fights defensively. I think the two of them show way too much respect for each other in the ring, though. And I'm talking about the very first reaction of all of us because I remember making a video, like a recap video on that fight, right? And we all saw it. I don't know if I was doing lives yet, but I remember we all saw it, and we all was like, it was a good fight. It definitely looked great for Canelo because he was so smooth in there. Like, that's the smoothest I've ever seen him, right? Like, the way he was slipping the shots, he looked great. But offensively, though, I thought it was like a sparring match. You know what I mean? Like, Jacobs went to war with Triple G, right? He went to war with Triple G. That was a great fight. And then the Canelo fight with Triple G was even better. Like, so when they decided to meet in the ring, I kind of thought that, you know, there would be periods where it got really physical, and it never did. It just kind of think like, I like you, you like me. They try to have like a little tension in the weigh-in or something, but I just don't think, like, I didn't see I think it was just a regular scrap. I didn't think anything of it. I wouldn't call it boring because I remember watching and rewatching it. I thought watching it again, I was a little bit more entertained by it, but it was a fight where I remember Canelo looking defensively smooth. He didn't, we already know that he's always had a good chin, but he showed his true slickness in that fight where he was just making Jacobs miss without having to go into a high guard. He was having his hands down, he was slipping the shots. And Jacobs was throwing combos and he just couldn't hit him. And it seemed like whenever Canelo, that's another thing too I like from Canelo in that fight. That wouldn't work. It wouldn't work for this fight here with Crawford because Crawford is a true southpaw. But Jacobs, whenever he switched southpaw, you can tell that it's not his dominant position. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of switchers. There's a lot of people that switches, but you can tell like when they have a dominant position, like Crawford is a dominant fighter as a southpaw, right? So Jacobs is a dominant righty. So whenever he tried to switch on Canelo will just rush him and just bully him until he switched back. Because he probably studied him and probably knew that he wasn't as comfortable as a southpaw. Same with Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury could switch, but if you notice when he switches and he fights southpaw, he's not as good. It looks good when he's fighting lower level guys, but when he does it, he's against the higher level guys. It's very temporary. He normally switches back pretty quickly. You know what I'm saying? So, Canelo in this fight, I think Canelo needs to bring a little bit more intensity in this fight. And I think, maybe it's just comfort. He's been here so many times. Does he have the killer instinct? I remember at some point Pacquiao lost the killer instinct. Wasn't really going for the knockout. Like even like, these guys are getting so much money now. You know what I mean? Like they're getting so much money. Like it's probably really hard to stay hungry. It probably is very hard. He's gonna get 150 million for this fight. Crawford's gonna get 50 million. So there's a part of me that feels he's gonna come at his current best because I know he doesn't want to lose to anyone, but this is a dangerous fight for him. I believe it is. I think he believes it is too. And plus, you don't want to move from a guy that just moved up from a couple of divisions. You don't want to go out like that, you know? So I think he's going to show up. But stylistically, though, I can't really compare the southpaws that Canelo has fought to Crawford. I think, I was going through the list. John Ryder, solid. But he's a solid fighter. He's like a gatekeeper. All right. He's not an elite level. And I don't think stylistically he does anything better than Crawford. Right. So that's him. Now, Caleb Plant is not a southpaw, but, we know how slippery he can be. And Crawford could be very slippery depending on what approach he wants to take. All right. Sometimes he's reckless, like he was against Kavaliauskas. I think he wanted to try to stop Kavaliauskas early, and I think he paid the price, almost getting knocked down. Kavaliauskas is a huge puncher at 47. But Saunders, I was watching some of the Saunders fight. I was watching a little bit of it. Again, I'm gonna go through some of these fights when it's really time to do a final breakdown for this fight. But I was watching a little bit of the Saunders fight, and Saunders just don't have the power, man. It's like no real, like, he's a good boxer, but I just look at him and I'm like, Crawford's better than this guy too. Like, we already know that, but there was nothing that stood out with Saunders to me. I thought in a couple of those rounds he did win. It went 8 rounds. I think Saunders won 3 to me. There were some points where he was tagging Canelo with some good shots. But Canelo didn't respect his power. And I'm saying that he's going to respect Crawford, but Crawford is just a little bit more precise, and I think he takes a little bit more risk than Saunders. Plus, Saunders is not a good inside fighter neither. And Saunders doesn't have the great cardio neither. I don't think he could fight 12 rounds at a high level. I think we've seen him burn out in later parts of different fights. Going down the list, Danny Jacobs, don't count him as a southpaw. He switched a couple times, but not on Crawford's level. And I would have to go down to Kirkland. Can't count James Kirkland. I would have to go to Lara. I have to go to Lara. And when it comes to the straight left hand, Lara is one of the best I've seen ever. From a southpaw, as a southpaw with the straight left, there's no opponent that did well against Lara. There's no opponent, even at his old age, and I know he's not fighting unifications and stuff right now. Lara, to me, you can't do what Lara do, like better than Lara, right? When it comes to the moving and timing that straight left, you're not gonna. It's not you can do about it. Crawford, southpaw, but he doesn't fight like Lara. Lara is a sniper, but Lara is limited though to that one approach. So when he fought certain fighters like a Castano or Monterosian back in the day and all those guys that really like smothered Lara, he looked bad against. So when he fought Canelo, I thought Canelo was being aggressive, but Canelo really couldn't touch him outside of the body shots. But I think what I think, and I'm going to end this here. I'm going to open up the chat. I'll drop the link in the comments. What I think here is, even though Canelo to me by far has the better resume, right? He does. There's no one on Crawford's resume that I can directly pull from. So when I look at Canelo's resume, I could say, I could compare it to Saunders, or I could go to Lara, I can compare him to like certain other Plant, guys that did certain things that I see Crawford do. Bivol. But one thing that Crawford has in his favor is that he can do things that some of those other opponents that Canelo had struggled against. He could do some of those things. I've seen him do it. Now, I haven't seen him do it to a guy on Canelo's level, but I've seen him do it. You get what I'm saying? I've seen him do it. So yeah, it's a very tough fight to call. I know a lot of people are basing their current predictions based on what we just seen recently from both. Crawford obviously has not been as active. He's been fighting once a year for years now. He did not take a tune-up. That's another comment that I've read a lot. Like, this guy didn't take a tune-up this year at 168. I think I understand Crawford. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand what's going on here. Crawford is taking the approach where less wear and tear. I stay fit outside of the ring all year round. I'm active outside of the ring. I'm always in the gym. I don't blow up in weight. If you've seen Crawford when he was standing next to Canelo recently after the skull fight, if you've seen him in some of these podcasts, because he's been doing a lot of interviews, right? If you've seen him, you can tell that he's ready for the weight. You can look at his arms, you can look at his shoulders, that he's not bulking up. He's just not cutting down in weight, and he's building on some of the muscle mass that he's probably gonna need to fight at 168. You know what I mean? You can just tell I see it in his arms. I see it every time he does interviews that he looks heavier, but he looks like he's already at the physical, you know, he already has the physique that he's going to need for that fight right now. You know, whatever he's weighing, if he's weighing 180, obviously he still has to cut down, but he's probably prepping at a higher, at a higher weight and trying to maintain that speed he's going to need at 168. I don't think he was looking to fight at 168 and take any risks and possibly losing a $50 million fight. He probably look at it like, well, I'm going to fight a William Skull and potentially risk this big Canelo fight if they're offering me the Canelo fight. You know what I mean? So that's the way I look at that whole situation. Yes, please smash the like button. Appreciate you guys. If everybody can just hit the thumbs up real quick for me, I would appreciate that support. Anybody that is willing. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Let me turn my echo thing off. Yeah. So, if anybody that wants to join up, I dropped the link already in the chat. I'll drop it again if anybody wants to just join and give me their opinions. In the meantime, I'll read some of the comments that you guys have been leaving. AO says, I'm basing my Bud prediction on that we are going to see Bud pull out all stops and put the best performance of his career against Canelo. Man, I can't wait for this. Yeah. I think that's one of the strongest arguments you can make. I think that, I know Canelo has been in there before at the biggest stages already. He's already had super fights. Crawford really mainly had one. But with that being said, sometimes being on a bigger stage so much, it doesn't even mean anything to you anymore. It could not mean anything to you because you've already been there so many times. How do you stay hungry? I'm not saying he's not, but it's a possibility that he may not be as hungry for this fight here. What's up, Too Rich?
Hey, what's going on, Boxingwave, man?
How you doing?
All right.
What you thinking?
Man, the way I look at this fight is this. It's kind of analytical. To say this, Crawford is a smaller guy. Even if he loses a little speed, gaining weight, he's going to be let's say, the quicker guy. So I expect him to have the more punch output. So right there, it's going to favor a decision for Crawford if it goes the distance, just based on punch output. Okay, so if we go to skill set, Canelo, he's a counter puncher, but when he punches for pure power, like he's loading up on a big shot. So if we go to skill set, we still got to edge it toward Crawford on the skill set, just having more tools in the toolbox. Now, when it comes to Canelo, he really just got one category, which is the weight, which is the power. So when Crawford comes in that fight, he knows he got to nullify Canelo's power. That's the main thing. He knows Canelo's a counter puncher. They're going to have to read on that. So you got to just stop the power. But if it go past 6 rounds, if Canelo can't stop him before 6, each round after that, Canelo is going to dwindle in energy. And I expect Crawford just to be able to get up more punches, which is going to make Canelo a little bit more vulnerable. So I think the fight favors Crawford. Okay. Not that Canelo couldn't win, but Canelo having a puncher's chance.
Yeah, so a few things. When we're talking about volume, we all know that volume doesn't always win fights because the judges are based on what's, more effective. Like Crawford lands a few punches that were clean and then Canelo's just coming forward, right? But Canelo lands that one big uppercut that may seem to affect Crawford a little bit, might get him to move out of the way. People are gonna, and I'm not just talking about, the judges is what matters, but the judges may look at that as, okay, this is a slow round. Canelo had the 1 or 2 punches that seemed to be more effective. Even though Crawford might be jabbing him to death, excuse me, might have landed one or two good shots. But we know for the most part, most likely, Canelo's going to be coming forward. He may be dictating the pace based on how they view it, or maybe some of the, the boxing public, they might be viewing it as Canelo's the one that's dictating the fight. I agree with you because it could be that way, but I don't want to base it solely on volume. Plus, also got to add to your point about him getting tired. When I say he gets tired, it really depends on what his opponent is doing. He doesn't automatically get tired. If his opponent is low volume and they're going punch for punch, like the Belanga fight, for example, even if Canelo is slowing down, it's hard to even tell because Belanga wasn't really doing enough to make him slow down, whereas Bivol was on his ass the entire time. You know what I mean? So it really just depends on how the pacing of not just Canelo, but his opponent is doing towards him.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that too. Like I say, it's Canelo, but I'm giving Canelo full credit if he could beat Crawford because the way I see it, we've seen Canelo lose. We've seen him lose. We know what it looks like for Canelo to lose. Even the Lara fight, the first Golovkin fight, he lost those fights, man. We seen it. We know what it looks like. We've never seen Crawford in that position. We don't know what it looks like. So if Canelo can put Crawford in the position that I've never seen him look like before, I'm giving him full credit. And I think that would be probably the top three names on his resume, even above Golovkin.
Yeah, no, I think, that's one point I didn't bring up, for the people that, because a lot of people got different opinions on how they feel about this fight. A lot of people be saying that this is just a money grab fight, which
we seen her.
But you breaking up, bro.
Go
you breaking up
2 or 3 weight class. People act like that hasn't happened. That has happened quite a few times in history. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you was breaking up a little bit. You was in and out. But a lot of people have negative opinions about the fight, which is fine.
Still there?
Yeah, I can hear you, but you're in and out a little bit. But no, I was gonna say what I was gonna say in response is that people have negative opinions about the fight, but one thing that I agree with what you said is that whoever wins this fight gets full credit. Oh, he left, but whoever gets this fight gets full credit for the win. And that includes Canelo. Everybody's talking about Crawford. If he wins, he's the GOAT, or he's the best in this generation, or this is the best. I've seen people, including content creators, I've seen people on Twitter say, if Crawford is able to beat Canelo right now, that's better than any win that Floyd Mayweather has. I've seen people say all of that. So it is a phenomenal win. It's a historical win if a guy can go up 2 divisions and do it. And recently, 3 really, because he's only had 1 fight at 154, a fight that he didn't look his greatest in. But 2 divisions to fight Canelo and win is huge. But if Canelo wins too, if that's that big of a win for Crawford, and many people have Crawford above, the only 3 names I always see in pound for pound is Usyk. Then the top 3 is Usyk, Inoue, and Crawford. And that's the way it's been for some years now. Now people battle on where that order that should be. But if Canelo is going to be beating a guy that many people consider to be top 3, Too Rich, thank you for joining, man. Yeah, the connection was bad. But if Canelo beats him, he should get credit, even though this guy moved up 2 divisions. He should. He should get credit. And I'm talking about win in a way where people respect and win. Like, that's a legitimate win. Like, if he is to knock out Crawford, or if he wins a clear decision, he should get credit for this win too. I mean, obviously, there's fights that we all wanted. You know, some people say they wanted D in this fight with Bud. You know, some people may even say they wanted the Virgil Ortiz fight more with Bud. And a lot of people wanted the David Benavidez fight. You know, I was one of those people that wanted that fight more than anything. But this fight here is a huge fight. Crawford has a lot of momentum going into this fight. Even though he's 37 years old, he looks fresh still. And he stays fit. He's not a party guy. He's not drinking. He's not doing all this crazy stuff that all these other fighters do in between their fights. And that's why he's at this level. But if Canelo beats him, Canelo will get my respect for beating him. Because to me, Crawford is better than these bigger guys that Canelo has been facing, all the way down. All the way down. Skull, Berlanga, Magia, Charlo, Ryder, you know, old Triple G and a trilogy. You know, outside of maybe Bivol and Triple G rematch, I think there's a clear advantage in skill and talent when it comes to Terrence Crawford. I think Bivol and a fresher Triple G is the only comparable ones. I think everybody else are really good guys, champions and all that. You know, Plant, I really like Plant. I'm a big Caleb Plant fan. I really like him. I don't see him to be on, you know, Terrence Crawford's level. I think he's just bigger. You know, he's a true 168 guy. You feel me? So I think that is the way I look at this fight. You know, I think that I rate Crawford so highly in talent that if he is to lose this fight, and I mean fairly lose, I gotta give Canelo his Crawford. I mean Canelo his Crawford. I gotta give Canelo his credit for taking the win. You know what I mean? And that's the way I look at it. But if Crawford beats him, it would be even bigger win because it's the smaller guy moving up. You know what I mean? It would be a huge, huge, huge win. Huge win, historical win for Crawford. You know, and then after that, you know, we always say they could both retire, but money talks, man. And if Turkey's going to be throwing around the kind of money that he's been throwing around, Crawford probably jump into another fight right after that because his name is going to be, well, in my opinion, if the fight is close, in any sense, and we get a decision, we may get a rematch. I think if Crawford wins, no matter how he wins, there will definitely be a rematch. But if Crawford actually loses the fight by like a split decision, or the majority of boxing fans believe that he should have won the fight, like the Triple G fight, we'll probably get a rematch. You know? Gio, thank you. He says, I'll give this win for Crawford bigger than Floyd. Let's be honest, bro. Floyd drained Canelo at 152. Let's not forget that. I'm not even talking about that fight, by the way. I'm talking about Floyd in general. I mean, I'm talking about Floyd in general. Like, I'm talking about, that's what people are saying. Like, people are saying this will be bigger than any Floyd win in his career. This is definitely be a better win than Floyd's win against Canelo if Crawford is to beat him, because what do people always say? Well, Canelo was drained, Canelo was too young, inexperienced. Before we get into the draining stuff, let's not get into the draining stuff. You know why I don't want to get into the draining stuff? Because Canelo has drained so many other people. And I don't go into the draining stuff every time Canelo beats someone that he made them do a rehydration clause or some sort of catch weight that favored him. You know, he got the win. If he got the win, he got the win. He got the win, he got the win. So, yes, he did come down to 52, but Canelo did weigh like, I don't remember how much more than he did against Floyd, but he weighed the night of the fight a whole lot more. Let's be real. Floyd was just way better than him. Floyd was way better than him. Floyd could do whatever he wanted. What I saw was someone getting outboxed by a way better boxer. That's all I saw. Crawford, on the other hand, fighting Canelo at this point, going up weights to beat a more seasoned Canelo is just a way better win, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, and Gio, thank you again. You know what I wanted to see Floyd do? I wanted him to go up to fight Sergio Martinez at 60. I really wanted that fight. I know a lot of people like to talk about Canelo. I mean, not Canelo, but they like to talk about Antonio Margarito and Paul Williams, and he should have fought Andrade or Lara. I mean, I wanted all of those fights too, but I wanted him to fight Sergio Martinez before Cotto got to him. I wanted him to fight him at 160 when Sergio Martinez had already knocked out Paul Williams, and when Floyd already had won a title at 54. I figured, like, yo, Floyd could win a title at 160 if he fought Sergio Martinez. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could have won that. I wasn't a fan of the Triple G fight. I thought the Triple G fight was a little too much. But I thought the Sergio Martinez was a realistic fight for Floyd. And I thought he should have took that fight or pushed for that fight to win another title at a new division. You know what I mean? That would have been a great fight. Not saying he don't have greater wins than that, but what I'm saying is, you know what I mean? Like, that just would have been another fire fight. You know, I think some of the other fights people talk about a lot, like Margarito, I think Margarito, and I think when Paul Williams, the reason why I want to say I wanted Floyd to, I wanted to see, like, for me, stylistically, I'm not saying these fighters are better than people that Floyd fought, career-wise. But stylistically, I thought Paul Williams and Erislandy Lara from 54 down was probably the most difficult opponents for Floyd. So when I say I wanted to see him fight those two, I think Paul Williams, because his high volume, his height, his length, his reach, would have been difficult. And I think Lara and his height, his reach, and his southpaw style, I just would have liked to see how Floyd would have managed winning those fights. But they're not, if he were to fight those guys and beat them, he wouldn't get as much credit for them anyway, because people don't give him credit for any of his wins. You know what I mean? So it really wouldn't have mattered. But as a fan, that's how I look at those fights. What's up, Clarence? So, I saw a comment earlier. Yeah, Blade says, "Do I think Crawford can KO Canelo?" No, I don't see it happening. But anything is possible. That's possible, but I don't see it happening. I mean, he knocks out Canelo. You think the world went crazy when he knocked out Spence? If Crawford knocks out Canelo Alvarez, I don't even know. I'm gonna be live on there. That might be the craziest reaction you ever see. I might break this whole shit. That would be ridiculous if Canelo gets knocked out. He don't even get knocked down. You know, like, you seen guys buzz him a couple of times. Like, Triple G buzzed him in the second fight, put a good shot. And was it Jose Cotto years ago? not like Miguel Cotto, but his brother years ago hurt Canelo really bad. I mean, Canelo wasn't even that good yet. you know, uh, I don't see that happening. If that were to happen, that dude, like that would be crazy. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. That would be crazy. That would be one of the craziest things. And we can compare it to some of the biggest moments, like Tyson getting knocked out by Douglas type shit. You know what I mean? Like that'd be crazy. Because Canelo, it's one thing for Canelo to lose. It's another thing for him to get knocked out by anyone. And I don't think if he were to get stopped ever, I think it's because he's just gonna get outworked. You know what I mean? And tired. Like I thought Benavidez. That's the one guy I always like. Yo, Benavidez was gonna be Canelo. And I know some of you get real sensitive when I say that shit. I'm like, I don't care. At 168, Benavidez was gonna be Canelo. I know they're never gonna fight, but Benavidez was beating Canelo. Canelo would have got tired, and Benavidez would have just won the fight, in my opinion. And I think that's part of the reason at this stage, Canelo didn't want to deal with that shit. You know what I mean? Just a bad style matchup for Canelo. I always thought that was a bad style matchup, not before the internet hype. I'm talking about just talking 168. It was never a good fight for Canelo, in my opinion. Everybody else, Plant, Smith, Saunders, yeah, good matchups for Canelo. That was never a good matchup for him. Because he would have to really work in that fight. And when Canelo gets tired, it's, would have been bad. Yeah. I figured more of y'all would want to join up today. I know a lot of you guys are at work. But yeah, I know Uncle Jack. Anyone can get KO'd. Anyone can get stopped. That's true, but it's not really likely for Canelo to get stopped. We sit in there and we seen him fight some big guys. And he was able to take the punches with ease. And we got to remember too, like Canelo's neck pulse, like his neck is. He has a wide neck, and he turns the punches. He turns with the punches well. You got to remember that. I don't think a lot of like when Triple G hit him with big shots, right? I don't think that he's getting the full impact of a lot of the punches he's taking. I think when he does take the impact, is from jabs mainly. A lot of the jabs he just walks into them. You see his head pop back. He'll eat those for free. But a lot of those big, like overhand right hands and shit, a lot of those shots, he's turning with the punch. And that's part of the reason why he has such a good, he's so durable. His punch his punch resistance is great, but he's also not taking a full bulk of a lot of those punches. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them, he's smothering his opponent. It just looks clean, but it's not. Yeah, I think if Bud wins against Canelo, I think he does have a good case to be, fighter of this generation. I definitely think, without a doubt, if he is to win, it would be the best win we've seen in this generation. Like, I think solo, single win. I'm not talking about whole resume and catalog. I'm just talking about one win. If he is to beat Canelo going up 2 divisions to face him, I think it will be and that's another thing, man. And I don't know why fans do this. I was saying this with Spence and Bud, and I've said this with other fights. If you're a Canelo fanboy, right, or whatever, if you're a Canelo fan, but I'm gonna say for fanboy, if you're a fanboy of Canelo, right, you defend him to the death. He does no wrong, no matter what. Why do you guys trash Crawford's resume? Because if Canelo beats him, right, if Canelo beats him, Don't you want Canelo to get credit for that win? When you guys trash him and said that, he ain't fight nobody, he only beat Spence, he looked bad in his last fight. Canelo is about to fight him, right? Canelo don't have to fight him. He chose to fight him, And if he is to beat Canelo, you trashing a guy that may potentially beat Canelo before the fight happens, it's done. And I said this to the Spence fans too. I was like, you guys are trashing him, saying that he ain't fight nobody but Gamboa. Why are you guys trashing a guy? And this guy can potentially beat Spence, or if Spence beat him, you guys were just saying he ain't shit. But that would have been Spence's greatest win if he had beat Spence. You know what I mean? That's why I say Canelo, at the end of the day, like, if Canelo beats Crawford, that'd be a good win for him too. It'd be a great win. It would be one of his top wins. It would be. So I think people need to relax a little bit. Yeah, Baypax, I understand what you're saying. His legacy is set. That's not the point I'm making, though. We already know his legacy is not depending on this fight. This fight for Canelo is a money grab. He was never going to fight Crawford until they offered him the kind of money that he's getting. That's not the point I'm making, though. There's nothing that I said in this video was to tarnish Canelo's legacy. Even the possibility of him getting knocked out, which I don't think is going to happen. But the possibility that he loses his fight, his legacy is already cemented. No one said that. I mean, at least I didn't. I don't know who's saying what in the comments. I think the win would be much bigger, right? Crawford. That's stating the obvious. Crawford wins is a bigger win for him. Canelo wins, it's a great win for him. It's one of his better wins on his resume, but it's not his greatest win, or it's at least up there with one of his great wins that he already had. But yeah, his legacy is already cemented. And guess what? Crawford's legacy is cemented too. But this would put him in a different category if he were to win. I'm talking about in history. You know what I mean? He's already proven to be a generation great. Now, I think winning this one would make him in that conversation with all of the elite greats of every generation. So there is a difference. I think Canelo's already solidified his career. You know what I mean? Can he do more still? Yeah, maybe, possibly. Maybe fight another division, but he's already done so much. But Crawford's done a lot too. And he is a 4-division champ. And he's a 2-division undisputed champ. You may not like the way he did it, or you might not think the people he beat is that good, but he did it. And it's very difficult to become undisputed in a 4-belt era. I think you guys gotta understand that. Apex response. So why isn't Charlo considered a great win for Canelo? Mel is bigger than Bud and undisputed. So you think they're equal? Apex, do you think does anyone here think that Charlo and Crawford are equal? Right, Josh Taylor, right? Josh Taylor was undisputed. Is Josh Taylor and Crawford equal? Is everyone that has won undisputed equal? Like, what are we doing? Are you just basing it on undisputed in size? How about you do me a favor? First, answer that question. Do you think they're equal? Like, do you think they're equal? And Mel is my boy, but they're not equal. They're not. I don't know why people would just make it like, and by saying that too, look at Canelo's resume. Do you even believe that? Who looks at the Charlo win for Canelo as one of his greatest wins? Like, what are we doing? I don't know. I don't know if you're trolling. I don't know. I'm gonna just leave it at that though. Like the Charlo fight was a fight that not one person asked for. There was a Charlo fight demand at 54 and at 160. And we're talking about Jamal Charlo when they were both champions at the same division. I'm talking about Jamal Charlo at 160. I'm talking about Jamal Charlo at 54, because at 54 at the time, Jamal looked like to be the better between the twins. He isn't right now, but at that time. Gio says, Gio Denke says, wait, they haters because Crawford's different, like he doesn't talk much trash. Crawford said it himself, that he's going to be himself. Wait, he said, Crawford said himself that he's going to be himself. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know how to really react to all of that. You know, I think I don't Crawford, like I don't even know how to react to that comment, because if you look at Canelo's resume, it's just so many other people there that I thought that was a better win for Canelo, you know, than the Jamel Charlo. I know Jamel was undisputed, but there's levels to even undisputed. There's a lot of undisputed champions historically that just some of them weren't that good. You know, it is what it is. It is what it is. Like, he's bigger, okay? So what? Yeah, but no, I don't agree with that comparison. I think it's like, look, when Jamel Charlo was undisputed, right? Or even before that, right? When he was unified, and Spence, who's part of the same camp, who's at a smaller division, was unified just like him. People rated Spence over Jamel. I never seen Jamel in a pound for pound conversation until he became undisputed. But it was hard to not. It was hard not to include him in that conversation because he was undisputed. So you would have to put him in the top 10 pound for pound. But when he was just literally just unified, you got to remember he had his hurdles going through that. You know, he lost to Tony Harrison. You know what I mean? People thought he lost the first Castano fight. Like you can't just base it off size. We're basing it off their careers. You know what I mean? Jamel, to many people, lost to Castano, which they made it a draw, but they thought it was a gift. Jamel lost to Tony Harrison. You know, those were recent fights. Those are two fights that are recent for Jamel Charlo. So even though he did, you know, come back and retain his titles, he won his titles back from Harrison. He went on to beat Castano and stopped him. Those are great wins. But when we're talking about Crawford and what he was able to do, I don't think there's any comparison, especially because Crawford has done this over, he's done it in 4 different divisions, but Jamel has only done it in 1, you know? So I don't think what's his name? Bapex. I don't think there's any other way I could explain it any better than that. Canelo just got way better wins. You know, I mean, I personally think the best names on Canelo's resume, not as far as wins, not fights. Like fights, no, I'll just say fights. Well, I'll say fights and then I'll say wins. I think fights, and I'm basing it on the time that he fought them. Okay. Shane Mosley at that time was he was really passive, but it was a good win at the time. I think the Austin Trout win was his first really good win, right? I think that was at that time, I think that was his best win because Trout was undefeated and he had just beat Cotto, and it was a huge, huge upset, right? That was a great win. And that landed him the Floyd Mayweather. And we know Floyd is the best guy on his resume. But he lost to Floyd, right? But he's the best fighter that Canelo's best fight was against Floyd Mayweather. And I think at that time, even though Canelo was really good, he had over 40 fights at that time. He's become a better fighter, specifically because of that fight. I think that fight with Floyd made him way better. Lara, in my opinion, was one of his best wins because Lara I would say I would pin that as a top 5 win for me. I'm not sure if I would pin Trout as a top 5 win, but I would pin the Lara fight as a top 5 win. Cotto is potentially a top 5 win too. But I would put Lara slightly over Cotto at that time. Slightly. All right. But I would put him there. I would put the Golovkin maybe his number 1 win. I'm probably going to put Golovkin at number 1. Right? I'm talking about Golovkin in a rematch, even though he didn't win the first. So I'm going to put him there. Golovkin. I think Sergey Kovalev might be a top 5 win. And I know Kovalev had just fought Yard. I know it was a weird timing of that fight. I know there was like a rehydration clause, but I still think that's a top 5 win. And yeah, I'm basing this off timing. I think those might be it for me. I think Golovkin win over Golovkin. I think the win over Miguel Cotto. There's Lanny Lara. Yeah. I can't pin Charlo in as a top 5 win because it was just like Charlo's an undisputed guy, but he wasn't, he was questionably the best. And we gotta also remember too, like he was the best at 54 at the time. At the very moment he won that title, that division started to go in transition. And at that time, Charlo was getting set to be the hunted. Those guys Jermell Charlo was beating is from the last crop of good 54 pounders. You know what I mean? Like Tony Harrison and Lubin. Lubin got exposed. Lubin was, a great win for him, but Lubin wasn't seasoned enough yet, so he paid for it in the very first round with that brutal knockout. Trout, that last class, Harrison, last class, Castano, last class. Look at 54 right now. 54 is a whole new crop of fighters that would have been hunting Jermell Charlo if he was still there, or if he is going to be there when he comes back. But yeah. What's up, Hyam? What's good? I haven't seen you in a while. He says Trout, Cotto, Lara, Golovkin, Plant, Smith, Saunders, all top 5. I mean, well, you just named like 7 people. but I get you, bro. You said best win historically is Kovalev. I think you can make a huge argument that that's his best win because he went up. The fight Kovalev, I think, did he skip 168? I think he went from 160 to 168 to fight him. I think, right? Yeah, he fought Danny. Now, but I mean, he had fought above. He fought at 168 before, right? He fought Julio Chavez Jr. and he fought Rocky Fielding. But for him to go as an active 160 champion to go straight up to 175 was dope. A Serious Field says, thank you for the donation. He said, Bud gets KO'd or just survives. Will we finally be done with the multi-weight jump matchups being treated seriously for a while? Like, I hate them all. This is a great comment, man. Yeah, this is a great comment. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, they usually don't make sense. I think when this first came out, I said something like, I think this weight jump is a little bit more justified than the recent ones we got. And when I say that, I mean like Charlo against Canelo, 2 division weight jump. No one asked for it. And Charlo just never seemed to be on that level. Brooke against Triple G, no way you could justify that weight jump. That was a stupid and probably the worst weight jump of them all. What else did we get? Mikey Garcia against Spence was the most random shit ever. But they did sell decent tickets at Dallas Stadium, so I guess people are going to just base that off that. And Rigondeaux against Lomachenko, I think people don't remember the fact that that was a 2-division jump. Because even though Loma had been fighting at 126, he had already moved up to 130 by the time Rigo fought him. And Rigo jumped all the way up to 130. Amir Khan and Canelo was a 2-division jump, right? Damn, was it? Rigo and Khan. Khan was fighting at 147 still. Yeah, he fought Chris Algieri. Yeah, because I remember when Danny knocked him out, that was at 140. Then he had like a streak of fights that he won. I was making content at that time. Yeah, so he fought Devin Alexander, beat him easily, beat Chris Algieri, beat Louis Collazo. And then out of randomly nowhere, he fought Canelo. But it wasn't 2 divisions. It was, but it's a technicality. It was a catch weight of 155. So this is a point where Canelo wasn't really trying to move straight to 160 yet. So he fought 1 pound over 154 because he couldn't make 154. So, I mean, I guess you can include that, but it's at a catch weight in between the weights. So it was like a weight division and a half. So I'll say that. But yeah, Rigo, Loma sucked. That was dumb. I ranted about that years ago, about that jump. I thought that fight was stupid, but there was a lot of people that was pushing for that fight at the time. What was the other one? Brooke and Triple G was the career-changing jump because Brooke never was the same fighter again. Mikey Garcia against Spence just kind of exposed Spence because Spence wasn't able to stop him. Yeah, Triple G and Brooke is the worst one. It's the worst one. It's the worst one ever. It was stupid. That was the worst one. That made no sense. You know what I mean? It was just Triple G was clearly a monster, and him to be fighting a little guy, a smaller guy like Brooke, that was dumb. That changed that guy's career. He was never the same. And he was still very good, but he was never the same. And then yeah, Charlo didn't play with it. He said, yo, I felt his power and I was not trying to get knocked out by it. So I moved. He didn't play trying to win. So I get you, whoever left the comment, a serious field. I just do believe that Crawford has a better shot against Canelo than all those other fights. Those fights I just named, I think Crawford has a better shot than all of those guys. So if it comes out like the way you're saying, which it could, like if he just gets knocked out or if he just survives for 12 rounds, then yeah, we'll be another fight where we just, damn, this guy jumped up. But to be honest, this is why Canelo should get credit for this one, because you have the odds are so close, the betting odds are so close, and you have a lot of people that really truly believe that Canelo Crawford would win. And I don't think this is just coming from fanboys. I just think that the timing of it, I think people really seriously believe that Crawford is so good that he can go up and challenge one of the best in his generation and beat him. You know, and I think I never agreed with this completely. I always wanted these two to fight. Like I wanted Crawford to fight, you know, some of the other guys that was down around 54, and I wanted Canelo to fight Benavidez. But I get why this fight is happening, because it's a money grab, you know, and they're trying to make a big pay-per-view thing out of it. But I also believe that the talent there is there. Like I think size for size, I would lean towards Crawford as far as like if they were literally the same size, fighting in the same division in their career, I would lean towards Crawford to be the better talent. But that's not what is happening here. Crawford is jumping up 2 divisions. So size is a factor. It's not everything. But I think those other fights I named, I think you really couldn't justify any of those fights. You know, especially Mikey and Spence, and especially the other one, Mikey, Spence, and Triple G and Kell Brook. That was stupid. That was dumb. You know, I mean, even Jamel Charlo, you can justify it a little bit more because he was undisputed, like the gentleman, Big Baypax, whatever said. But I didn't like that one either, because I don't look as Charlo as being a more skilled fighter than Canelo. I think you can make a debate that you can literally make a debate that Crawford is more talented than Canelo, as opposed to all of the other ones. All right. Anyway, I got to get out of here, guys. I just wanted to stay until 3. Y'all have a good rest of your day. I'm going to try to come on live tomorrow, just discuss some other topics. You know, I still haven't made a video about Pacquiao and his return. I wanted to give you my thoughts on that. And a few of the other fights that's coming up, like the fights that's on that card, Fedor and Senzu rematch and all that. And I do been wanting to spin back and talk about Martin Piccoli. I've been meaning to make a video about him. Like I want to talk about that, but I'm gonna try to go on a live tomorrow again and chop it up with you guys. All right. But listen, y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys soon. Please hit the thumbs up on your way out and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Peace.